What would it be like to be a chief criminal investigator? Now, from media depictions alone, you probably have a fairly good idea of what that's all about. But on today's episode, we're going to dig a little bit deeper beyond that because I've got this great guest. His name is Kevin Atkins, and he is highly specialized within the field of law enforcement. And not only is he a chief criminal investigator, he's also the commander of this highly specialized task force called ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children. Now, as the name of the task force implies, this does reference a fairly sensitive topical matter. So if that's acting as a trigger for you in any negative way, shape, or form, I do encourage you to exercise some listener discretion. You might want to sit this one out. But for those who are interested in law enforcement, this is a highly informative talk. We get into matters relating to law enforcement as a whole. We also get into the task force work, some of the obvious challenges, but then also some surprising rewards associated with it as well. So as always, I do encourage you though to go check out the full-length audio version. There's just so much I can cram into these short 10-15 minute YouTube videos, whereas the audio versions run 50-55 minutes. And you can find those wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... All right, well, I think it's about time to get into things, so why don't we? Now, I figured one of the best ways to open up this video would be to look at law enforcement as a whole. The media depictions of what it's all about doesn't exactly mirror reality. So here's a clip of Kevin breaking that down. And mind you, this is just a snippet from the conversation that we had on this topic, but all the same, I think it gives you a pretty good idea of where Kevin's coming from.
From a local perspective, when you're especially in a small community like I was how I started my career back in 1999, it is enforcing law, but you go into it thinking, I'm gonna lock up bad guys. I'm gonna drive cars really, really fast. I'm gonna have my gun out and chasing bank robbers. And you realize so much more is about solving problems and working with the community.
Okay, well, next up, I want to give Kevin an opportunity to explain the very important work that he and his task force are involved with. So have a listen.
But this also might be an opportune time to learn a little bit more about your work specifically, for the South Carolina Attorney General's office, and specifically the Internet Crimes Against Children section, ICAC. Maybe you could share with listeners a little bit more about what you do specifically.
Yes, sir. Since 2014, I've been in the ICAC unit at the Attorney General's office, and since 2019, I've been the commander. We have 61 ICAC task forces across America, and each person over those task forces are called commanders. I don't really like that title, but I'll take it. And we're focused on anybody who aims to hurt, harm children using the internet, using electronic equipment, phones, laptops, email, social media accounts. And unfortunately, it's a full-time business. We've seen our rates of cases go up about 35% every year. And we're not adding, any more really manpower or money to the equation. I'll tell you, in 2018, we got about 1,800 cyber tips from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And this year, we're going to be between 10 and 11,000 when the final numbers come in. And,
oh my gosh.
And that's just in a couple of years. Yes, sir. And it's a full-time job. Each year we I don't like to say we hit a record, we break a record, but we hit a new high watermark, I'll say, in arrests. This year we'll arrest more people than we've ever arrested on this task force. It'll be over 300 people. And I think last year we were around 281. And the numbers are still growing. I wouldn't shock me to finish the year about 310, 315 for a small state like South Carolina. But it is a full-time job, unfortunately, and it's one of those jobs where it's target zero. I love to put myself out of business, and there is no crimes against children involving the internet, but it's growing exponentially.
To add further clarity to the professions that we examine here on Life As A, I do have the segment A Day in the Life, and it is as it sounds. We dive into what the work is all about. So here's a clip of Kevin discussing his work within the ICAT, or Internet Crimes Against Children division. So check it out.
In South Carolina, we're super proactive, so I try to give too big of a peek behind the curtain sometimes. I say that a lot at press conferences because they always want to tell us all the different things you're doing and the platforms you're on, and we just say all of them. But a typical day, like yesterday, all of us were up before and on the road around 4:30. We did a search warrant yesterday. We're related to a cyber tip that was generated by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It was a Snapchat case, and did a search warrant, made an arrest on that. We also do proactive undercover investigations where people are familiar with To Catch a Predator years ago, show that Chris Hansen hosted. We do something similar, and so where we pose as minors and see if individuals will travel to have sexual encounters with underage minors. So we do that a lot of times. We'll embed and work an 80-hour week and knock that out. And then a lot of it's just processing these, we call them cyber tips, which is these electronic service providers are mandated by law to report these criminal actions to NCMEC, or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And if it comes back to South we take those cases in. And those are the ones I was saying we're seeing about a 35% increase each year. And so just trying to deal with the volume of that. We have an education component too, where we try to go speak to schools, community groups, civic groups, whoever wants us to speak. So we try to balance that in too. But our office has somebody we pay full time to do that. We have an education coordinator. We're one of only a handful of task forces in America that have one of those full time. But most of it is just processing paperwork. It's the stuff they don't show you on cops. We're processing paperwork. We're writing search warrants and court orders to these electronic service providers and trying to reverse engineer these cases to track down the bad guy and then go pay them a visit is what a lot of it is.
Now, in attempting to portray an accurate depiction of this work, I did ask Kevin about some of the obvious challenges and difficulties associated with this work. So here's a clip of Kevin explaining that for us too.
Having to go through these cases, and that's the dirty side of it. Is we know people make these videos, they do terrible things with children, but somebody's got to actually sit down and watch and listen to these things and describe them. And so that is the dirty part of the business. And so we have a lot of people that try it and text me or call me and say, hey, this is not for me. And I'm appreciative of that too. I don't think we should be a tough guy in this business because of the mental health component of it. And so I tell people all the time, I'd much rather y'all tap out now and tell us this is not for me. I can't be involved in these type of cases than drag it out 2 or 3 years and be miserable and put yourself in a dark place psychologically and emotionally.
Okay, well, moving along, one of the questions I had as I got into this discussion with Kevin, it was based around what he'd been sharing already and what he shared, in this video alone. There's some obvious challenges with this work. So as a professional, as a human being, how do you manage these emotions? In order to be at your best, of course, you've got to be, tip top. You've got to have everything straight up here. But what you're seeing and what you're experiencing on a daily basis, if you're not careful, it can really knock you off course. So that was the question I was coming in with in this clip. And here's Kevin's response.
I could imagine like the wins being like just out of this world for you and your team when you're putting, one of these perpetrators behind bars or you're successfully prosecuting them. But then conversely, at times some of these dead ends, perhaps when, you're trying to find somebody who's done something terrible, but you can't. It leads nowhere. So my question here is like, how do you manage that roller coaster of emotion, the ups and the downs? How do you get through those moments?
Yeah, it can be frustrating. You've done all you can do, and somebody's getting away with something like this. And for us, like I said, there's 4 of us, and we also have an analyst. I don't want to forget her. And so the 5 of us can sit down and talk, and we can commiserate about some of our failures. And we also have a mental health professional assigned to us. And so that's been we had to fight really, really hard. We were not as progressive as maybe we should have been. And we did fight for it and we got it. And I think it's been beneficial to our office.
Now, admittedly, to this point, this conversation has been a little bit darker, right? And for obvious reasons here. But that said, there are some inherent rewards in this type of work. So I wanted to find out what those were to get this balanced, even look at the profession itself. And this is what Kevin had to say about that.
Like, how do you go about giving meaning to the work that you're doing? I guess that's what I'm driving at right now.
Knowing that you've had situations where you did something you didn't think was that important, but a child got arrested, like you made somebody's life better. They're not going to send you a thank you card, or it's not even about getting the awards or the recognition. I don't know we all like to get an award or recognition if it feels good, but I don't know anybody that came into this line of work just to get recognized for doing this. But I mean, the benefit is a lot of things I take great pride in if our task force is first to do something. Like we're the first ones to try this, or we're the first group to work with another agency or group, or being innovative. That's kind of where I take the pride in it. Outside of knowing you're actually helping real children, or you can't unring a bell, right? You can't undo some of the horrible things that have been done. But if you can help find somebody and get them access to therapy and counseling and trying to move forward, those are the things you hope that you can do to get people on the right path. Because I know in talking to a lot of offenders, they tell me, hey, I was abused. These things happened to me. I'm just continuing this cycle of bad behavior. And not everybody is like that. But you kind of think, well, what if somebody could identify their problem, got them some help, got them some counseling? Could we have prevented, would I not be having this bad guy sitting next to me in my police car doing a recorded interview with them?
Well, I think we are drawing to a close within this video, but as always, I do encourage you to go check out the full-length audio versions. There's just so much more contained within them. For example, in this talk, we get into the role of technology, things like AI, and how that is playing out within the space that Kevin operates in. And also, Kevin shares some rather humorous stories relating to the work. Beyond that, we get into topics such as mental health and a bunch more relating to law enforcement as a whole. As noted earlier, you can find these audio versions wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... And finally, while I've got your attention here, that like or subscribe will go a long ways. All right, I think that just about does it. So keep an eye open for the next video. It'll be dropping very soon. We'll see you then.